Welcome to Have a Kind Word with Yourself, a podcast that helps us to keep kind, creative, and connected. My name is Rose Kondo, and I'm your host. I'm a poet, a performer, a theatre kid from Winnipeg, Canada, and I love connecting with communities. In these episodes, I chat with fellow creatives about their work and some of the things that help them to keep well along the way, and we use the letters in the word kind to frame our conversation. Today, we chat about sharing stories, about how cooking is a connection point, and the power of inspiring music, plus the important mixture of courage and curiosity in how we move through our days. Before we start, here's a question. What is your jaw doing? Any chance it's clenched? Any chance your tongue is like pressed up against the top of your mouth? Any chance you can take a deep breath and let your jaw loosen a little bit? Maybe massage your cheeks a bit. Feels good. Give yourself a little moment of kindness and calm. All right, let's get these kind words rolling. My guest today is Justin Deeley. Justin is the content marketing producer at CBC, serving CBC Manitoba and Saskatchewan regions. He has a passion for storytelling and loves producing audio and video pieces that enrich the community. Justin has a background in theatre, comedy, and performance, and was a member of prominent sketch comedy troupe The Spleen Jockeys in Winnipeg in the 90s and early 2000s. These days, in addition to his work as a producer, Justin dons a gold lame jacket, wig, and sunglasses, and sings in an 80s tribute band, The Steamers. Welcome, Justin, to Have a Kind Word with Yourself.
Hey, welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me. That makes me sound more important than I am. So thank you.
Oh, I think you do yourself a disservice. You do lots of amazing work. So, Justin, what are some kind words that you've heard recently?
Oh man, that's a good question. Yeah, I've heard. Okay, so I was at a conference in Toronto with like 200 people that I only know of. Like I don't really talk to them all that much, but I interact with them and that sort of stuff. And it came time to have a some feedback from the audience where I was, and I introduced myself, and I got this amazing cheer of like they people actually knew who I was, which was kind of nice, and it was all colleagues who I've worked with, but indirectly, because in my work I work in a small region in a big company that has lots of people who are 2,400 kilometers away, and I talk to them through GChat, but I never really talked to them in person. So there you go. There's my latest kind words, which it made me feel all nice and warm inside and welcomed. So
That's
that was
amazing. Yeah, I think I always start with that question. And I think you're the first person to say that you've had 200 people cheer for you. So, yeah,
which is
that's
nice. I
amazing.
know it
That's
sounds really
great.
egotistical. That's not the goal, but yeah, it was just nice. It was nice to have that nice warm feeling of welcome. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's nice to allow yourself to feel good about that too. Yeah.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
And so we'll get into the kind chat in a moment, but I have a couple other questions to start. And one of them is whether you can remember how our paths first crossed. Because, of course, we're both Winnipeggers. I live
Mhm.
in Manchester, England now, but yes, we knew each other in the prairies. And do you remember when we first crossed paths?
I will remember. Yeah, I remember my time of life when we first crossed paths. Yes,
Yeah.
which is at the University of Winnipeg. We're both theater students at the time, and so through mutual friends, we met. So yeah, am I right or am I wrong?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we met. I think there were times of like going to house parties,
Yeah,
going to shows. Certainly came to see you perform in the Spleen Jockeys loads, both in Winnipeg and Edmonton fringes, I think.
probably. Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
we were in that wonderful mishmash of theater student joy.
Yes, yeah, totally, totally. If you're thinking of a kind place, that's a kind place. right? That like
Definitely.
that time of life and in that area and with those people, kindness was, at least in the Winnipeg scene for sure, kindness is very important sentiment.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And we were all just a bit kind of, I mean, theater kids, I think generally are this. We were all kind of a bit weird and bonkers and kind of
Yeah, for
goofy and
sure.
stuff. And it was
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
embraced in that friend group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Well, here we are all these years later.
Yeah.
And as I read in the intro, that you have done loads of different work. And I know you do producing work now, and you do still have a lot of kind of creative outputs. And I just wondered if there is something that you love most, or one thing that you love a lot about the creative work that you do.
Well, I love where I'm from, and I adore being Canadian. And one of the things that I really remember back from those days of performance and that sort of stuff was being able to go across the country and share stories. And that sort of story sharing has been kind of central to my whole career, both in performance and in producing, now in broadcast producing. I do a lot of community work, and that's the biggest thing that I do in my job. So it's really amazing that I get to spend time. One of the things, like I also work in Alberta, and I also work in the East Coast sometimes. I've done work in the North of Canada, and I've been coast to coast touring it. And every time I'm still amazed at the people and how different we are, but yet how much there is a common thread between all of us. I don't want to say before we even go further, I think this project you're doing is super important. I think we live in like an unkind world these days, and a lot of what we see and how we connect are on unkind platforms. And so it's important. What you're doing is really, really important, and I thank you for that. It's yeah.
Oh, thanks, Justin. That's so nice. I was thinking just earlier today, actually, listening to CBC, which I do daily. I love listening to podcasts from the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, in case any of the English listeners are wondering what I'm
Yes.
talking about. And and it was politically themed, and I was just thinking about all of the turmoil that's happening, and how our zones, our communication zones, are so flooded with negativity, and just my activism at the moment, I think, is trying to reverse
Yeah.
engineer that and put kindness out in a kind of flooding way, perhaps for
Yeah.
people's ears or on social media. So yeah, so thank you for saying that. And I love what you're saying about the stories across Canada too. I was speaking to someone recently here in England about the creative scene in Canada, which is just vibrant, but it's such a different um, setting than it is here in the UK, where I can get to a completely different part of the country, where the community is different, the accent is different, the history is a little bit different in like 2 hours, and there's just the vastness of Canada is so different, and it is amazing that you've had that experience of going across that giant land and exploring story and performance. That's brilliant.
Yeah, like we have way more in common in Manitoba, where I am, with the northern states of like North Dakota and Minnesota. We have the same weather, we have the same agriculture, we have the same industries, we have all that kind of stuff. I have way less in common with my colleagues and fellow Canadians who live on the East Coast and are dominated by the fishery and dominated by a maritime lifestyle and that sort of stuff. And yet, I still feel more kinship to them than I would the North Dakotans or the Minnesotans. So
Mm.
Canada's a strange place that way.
Hmm.
Uh, I once had a professor describe it as it should have, the Canada and the US should have been divided, you know, like like
From north to
east to
south.
west. Yeah,
Oh, east
north
to
to
west.
south,
Yeah.
right? Like east to west instead of because we have so much more in common with that, which is kind of a mind bend, but like it's an interesting perspective. I don't think I agree with it, but it's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. And I'm sure this will come up in our chat as we go, but and I think a lot of people see the CBC as a real unifying factor for such a huge country, that it is such a platform for exploring the vastness of the Canadian identities. So yeah, just amazing that you are such a thriving part of that. But we're going to jump into our kind chat. And
Right.
for listeners who are new, uh, I use the word kind to frame these discussions. So, being a poet, you might consider it like an acrostic poem, or if you are like, what the heck is that? It's basically an acronym. So, I use a word for each of the letters in kind to give us a jumping off point. So, the first letter is K, and the word I have is kitchen. So, Justin, what is in your kindness kitchen? What do you use to cook up or create kindness for yourself?
Like my wife and I, our little family of five, my wife and my three kids, like cooking is the most important connection point for us. So yes, my kindness kitchen is like my eldest daughter loves my mac and cheese recipe. So whenever she needs a pick me up or we're celebrating, it's like mac and cheese for her and making that and that sort of stuff. And that is yeah, kitchen is the most important part of our family home and that sort of stuff. And my wife puts steak on the barbecue for, it's chocolate chip cookies for my youngest daughter, pizza for me, that sort of stuff. But that's the connection point that has really allowed us to stay connected and happy and all that kind of stuff as a family and have a wonderful little unit is the fact that it is a requirement that every night we eat together around the dinner table, and that is super important. So there you go. So the first one that pops to mind is my daughter Bella, her love of my mac and cheese, and so just the way she loves it, creamy, cheesy,
Love that.
sticky. Yeah, like yeah. Got vegetable, got mushrooms in it. She loves.
Nice.
It's
Do you
got
do anything on top? Any kind of crispy
yeah, you
topping?
bet. There's like a croutons. I make croutons that goes on top. So there's like a bread and that, and it's a good side dish. There's spinach in it. It's like yeah, it's really good.
Oh, that sounds
I like
amazing.
it. But every food you make, you love, right?
Of
But like
course. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's kind of a
But yeah,
given.
cooking and baking. That's like the. I hate this term, but it is the love language. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's funny that that term was in my mind. I can't say I hate it, but I can appreciate that some people do. But that
yeah.
food is often a way that affection or connection is expressed,
Oh
and it
yeah,
can just
exactly.
sometimes transcend language.
Totally,
You're,
totally. It's referring to what we talked about before. There's like to me, there's the three connection points of humanity, and that's music, it's stories, and it's food. And those are the three things that we've all shared throughout all humanity are those things. So
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
love that. The description of the mac and cheese actually makes me hungry. But as we were talking about before we started recording, in Winnipeg, where you are, and in England, where I am, we are both having heat waves. So the thought of
Oh,
having a
okay,
giant
yeah,
dish of pasta is a bit, we'll save that for some colder weather. But
that's right. Yeah.
I love what you say too about your family eating together, because I know you all have really busy lives, and your kids are all doing loads of amazing different things. So to really have that draw to still sit down and dine together, it sounds really important.
That's super important. It's like, and it's all from my wife. She's like my partner, my wife Karen, who's that's her like fundamental like must have, and she's totally right. She's totally right. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. Definitely that sense of connection for sure. So the next letter in the word kind is I, and the word I have for that is inspiration. So
Hmm.
where do you find inspiration, Justin?
Oh, I find it in I don't know. There's different points in my life where I find the inspiration in different things. So I'm inspired by things that I find ridiculous, and strange. I was just like, there's this open doors thing in Manitoba today. Like they put out a press release today, and I was like, they're opening this like Anglican church and cemetery where all these like famous Manitobans are buried. And I was like, oh, where's
Oh,
that thing? So I Google mapped it, and somebody in the park that's right beside this church, Google mapped like featured a park bench Like, so you click on it and there's reviews about how good this bench is. It's got like a
What?
4.9 star review. It's got like, it says open 24 hours a day. It's like, it's like somebody created this little business out of a park bench with
Yeah.
reviews and everything. And to me, those are the kind of things that inspire me to like be creative and that sort of stuff. Like I said, it's the geography around me, which I think really
Mm.
explains the places in which we live. You know, Manitoba's a heat wave right now, but in generally, it's a pretty cold place to live. And
Mm.
so inspiration comes from the fact that you aren't spending that time outside in the wintertime. So you become creative and you do creative things because you're trying to find ways to spend the time and that sort of stuff. You mentioned in your intro, like a little bit about my band. So my band's been together for like 21 years now, which is a really long
Wow.
time. And it's been pretty stable with the amount of people that have been in it.
Mm.
We've all had children and that sort of stuff. While since the time we started this band to now, tomorrow night we're doing a show where we're opening for the band that the son of my guitarist and sax player created because they saw us having so much fun, they decided to start a band as well. So
What?
we're playing with them tomorrow night. So that's completely inspiring and has nothing to do with the ridiculousness of the band or any of the cheesiness of a tribute band and that sort of stuff. But that is the kind of thing that is kind of inspiring and kind of fun. We're this like full circle family, really. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is so
So
cool.
there's a few things.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It really, I mean, that sounds wonderful, and I'm sure it's going to be a really fun night. And some of the other things that you mentioned really show a kind of lens of curiosity that you have as well to notice those things, to notice about the bench. That sounds incredible.
I think anybody who works at a broadcaster of any sort of, at all, is probably is curiosity is sort of the foundation, which is a great word, which I should have said, but thank you for bringing it up. But yeah, curiosity is that's really, really important. And curiosity is what fuels the entire industry that I'm in. For
Yeah.
those who don't know, CBC is pretty journalistically relevant and sound and that sort of stuff. So there's other stuff that CBC does, obviously outside of journalism. It's
Mm,
very much it's the BBC of Canada, if that helps your English viewers and that sort of stuff. Although it's funded completely differently and it's done in a
hmm
different way, but the curiosity is sort of the foundation of all that. So yeah.
hmm Yeah, yeah, I love that. And it really does kind of catch everything. So I love what you're saying about in the position that you're in, it's very helpful to have that lens of noticing things that inspire you. And actually that kind of links to our next letter. So the letter is N and the word is noticing. But for this chat, I've framed a question more about what you notice about kindness. So what are you noticing about kindness these days?
Well, I notice a lack of kindness, and then when you see kindness, it really sticks with you.
Mm,
So, because of that, and I think we're super siloed in our online lives, which is how a lot of us live, and uh, and I think we see a tremendous amount of unkindness there. Social media rewards your perspective, but never challenges it, right?
yeah.
And so you live in this space where people throw out barbs and throw out unkind things all the time. So when you do see kindness, it really sticks with you. I noticed the other day, Winnipeg's downtown core is not the um, it's not the nicest of places. There's a lot of
Mm,
houseless folks. There's a lot of substance abuse. There's a
hmm
lot of uh, and there's a lot of crisis, like right
hmm
on the streets sometimes, and you
hmm
notice it, especially um, coming down to work and that sort of stuff. Um, so yeah, I mean, I noticed the other day just somebody helping someone who had, maybe you don't know, but OD'd, sorry, on the street and that sort of stuff in a bus shack. So you notice those kind of things. You notice people who are passing fruit to folks who need it on the street in your car as you're driving by, that sort of stuff. We get a lot of that kind of kindness here. In Manitoba, it's a pretty kind place, in all honesty.
Hmm.
There obviously is different perspectives and there's unkindness and that sort of stuff, but we do look out for each other here a lot. Um, Heat wave right now, you notice people passing out water to folks, that sort of stuff. That's kind of stuff is really important. So, and I think we need to reward those.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're saying, I think, makes me think of I mean, I know Winnipeg's not a monolith, Manitoba isn't either. We're all there's plenty of diversity of culture and opinion and behavior and stuff. But I remember hearing anecdotally years ago something about Winnipeg perhaps being a slightly more tolerant place, generally speaking, because of the extremes of weather, that people just have to kind of get on with things. So if it's, minus 40, you generally still have to go to work. Or if
Yeah,
it's a baking heat wave, you have to kind of crack on with stuff. And I wonder if that then links into this spirit of determination and resilience that isn't just for individuals, but for the kind of wider community.
I think it does. I think we have to be careful about framing Winnipeg that way. Like Winnipeg's also has been known as the most racist city in Canada, right?
That's
So
true.
I think it depends on the perspective. I think in terms of weather and survival and those sort of things, we do understand each other as human beings and try to help each other out. Not maybe not necessarily in all other ways, but certainly in that way, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know how far you can go into, political discussion, but I have been seeing a lot of Wab Kinew, who is
Yeah.
the leader of Manitoba. He is the first person of Indigenous heritage to be a premier in Canada, I believe. And he's just making a lot of change, and he's seems to be acting with a lot of integrity and like holding people to account for things that they say, and it feels like it's maybe sowing some seeds for some really great connections down the road.
Yeah, I think so. I think Wob's I think full disclosure, I worked with Wob. Wob was a CBC journalist
Oh, of
for
course he
a
was.
while.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't sort of divulge political affiliations and that sort of stuff. And honestly, I try to not even have them. But I think what makes Wob so resilient is his past. It hasn't been the cleanest of pasts.
Hmm.
Um, but he has come to terms with that. And very interestingly, that was the way in which his political opponents, during the election period, really tried to really tried to persuade voters to their side by bringing up things that had happened in his past and that sort of stuff. But what's really interesting about WAB, and I think this is very interesting about the Indigenous population, at least in Canada and Manitoba, in their culture, is that there's a wisdom that comes from your personal failures, and coming
Mm.
through that is something that is rewarded, and it makes for a more understanding society, in all honesty. And I think that that has really allowed him to rise above that. And in all honesty, that perspective is something that I think all over the world, political figures probably need to come to terms with and to be able to accept their failures and accept their failings and be able to rise above that. And I think the electorate benefits when that happens. So that's not a pro Wob push or any of that kind of stuff. It's just an
Sure.
observation about what we're learning in Manitoba by having an Indigenous leader at the very top of our political place. So.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much in what you've just said, Justin. That's really interesting because I think it's so widely felt that there's an inauthenticity to a lot of political leaders.
Yeah.
And when someone has the temerity and the courage to be honest about not being perfect, and being upfront about that, I think in some ways that links to a lot of what I hope this project starts to touch on is inner kindness comes from also acknowledging that sometimes you may have not made great choices or, wronged people or hurt them, but that you still inwardly deserve kindness and that cultivation within individuals can then ripple out to outer kindness.
So we live in a fascinating time in Canada because we're starting to come to terms with our colonial past,
Mm,
which we didn't before. Honestly, our history books are not correct. Our learnings in school, in fact, are not correct. And we talk about, political things and that sort of stuff. WAB is an NDP, New Democrat Party, which is a left-leaning party. But the apology of Canada towards Indigenous peoples came from a conservative government, a conservative federal government. That's who led that charge. So, well,
mm,
I think you can't be uh, politically affiliated and not ever think about the other side and the good things that they can do. And that's really a key point right now. We're coming to terms with what it has means to be partners in this land. Uh,
mm,
and and that's not always easy. It's called the Truth and Reconciliation here in Canada and Manitoba. And I think we are probably starting to come around to the truth, and certainly further down that path than we are to reconciliation, I
mm-hmm,
think. But I mean, that alone is, helps um, get an Indigenous leader elected. We have a lot of, Red River Métis has their own government here in Manitoba, right? And that sort of stuff. So it's not like it's the first Indigenous leader, but certainly of a wider, like as a wider premier, like in Manitoba, of the wider province and that sort of stuff, it certainly is. And I think it's made a difference. It allows him, I think we're learning that from the fact that Wab has accepted his past, he's able to call out other things and other people, and they're not quite used to it. And
mm-hmm,
sometimes it makes it uncomfortable, but it does make it truthful, right? Wab
mm-hmm,
hasn't been perfect in office. Some people would argue he has, but he hasn't. There's stuff
mm-hmm.
that has happened. We have a really bad legislator right now for question period in legislature. Teachers have been complained. A speaker of the House has
Mm.
ruled against and saying, we're putting new rules in place because teachers don't feel comfortable bringing their students to watch the political process anymore because it's
Ay, ay,
just,
ay.
it's not how you act. So there are
Mm-hmm,
there are things that have been. It's again, that's why I say it's important what you're doing because kindness is the way to fix that. We can have
mm-hmm.
different perspectives and still be kind.
Yeah,
So
and we can call things out and speak truth to power and still be kind.
that's correct. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's growing examples of that. We just need to amplify those as much as we
Yeah.
can. So we'll come to our last letter in just a moment, but I'm just circling back to what you said earlier about the three kind of bedrock things of
Sure.
human connection, about music and stories and food. And you spoke a bit about food and you've kind of shared a bit through stories, but I know music is really important to you, and you are in a tribute band, but I wonder if you can speak a bit more about your connection with music, perhaps particularly music created by Canadian artists.
Oh, sure. I could. I mean, I am not. First, I'm in a band. I'm not a musician.
Yeah.
I would not. I would not. I would not consider the two things the same. Everything in humanity has a rhythm to it, and I think
Mm,
that's where music comes into it, and I think that's why we connect with it. I could name Canadian artists that I like and that sort of stuff. But to me, you're a poet. You know that as well. Rhythm is the thing that makes those words sing. Um,
mm.
I read a great book about the history of music, and one of the things that really stuck with me was that the caves of Lascaux in France, which were those sort of ancient caves that were discovered years ago, that the place where the most paintings were was also the most resonant chamber
Oh,
in that
wow.
space, in those caves. And it leads to the fact that they're I was always say music, stories, and food because all of us share food and culture, and all of us use that to sustain ourselves. We use stories to connect ourselves, but pre-language, it was that rhythm and that music that probably
Mm,
brought us all together. Um, and so that's what music means to me. That's driven. You talked about spleen jockeys for a long time ago from our it was sketch comedy that we're doing funny things and all that kind of stuff. But the way to make that successful, I always found, was that there was a certain rhythm we had to stick to be able
yeah.
to make that connection and make that work. So a comedy is very rhythmic, right? But
Yeah.
But that's what I would say about music and its connection to humanity is that rhythm is very important. As far as like Canadian music and that sort of stuff, I'm a lover of the '90s band. One of my favorites of all time, and still are the Rheostatics, and that's because it
Mm.
felt like whenever you listen to their music, it feels like the soundtrack to the land on which we live. And so whenever you're road tripping or anywhere, that it sounds like what you're seeing and what you're smelling and what you're feeling and that sort of stuff. So
Hmm.
that's probably my favorite Canadian band of all time. I do have to shout out the amazing Calgary punk band Chicks Dig It, who are like one of my favorites of all time. Ridiculous. If you like the Ramones, you'd love Chicks Dig It. So
Nice.
um, there you go. So yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
in fact, there's a kind thing that my buddy Taryn. There's one of the kind stories. I was in my buddy and colleague Taryn from Saskatchewan. We were both in meetings in Calgary. I'd had super long travel day, and he was like, "No, you got to come out to punk rock bingo tonight at this pub." And I was like, I am so tired. I don't want to go and do that. He's like, no, no, you really got to come, man. Like, you got to come. And I was like, okay, fine, 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 fine. And he knew Chicks Ticket's like my favorite Canadian punk band of all time. And,
Yeah.
uh, and he knows them. So he was like, my buddy's going to pick us up. And it was the lead singer, KJ, who picked us up in his minivan. And we
What?
spent, yeah, so it was this kind little thing where I got to meet one of my musical faves and hang out all night at a pub, just talking. And honestly, as two like late 40s guys at the time, all we talked about all night was not music or anything. We played punk rock bingo and talked about our kids, and that was it.
Oh,
So
I love that.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's amazing. That
there you go.
like common ground found with
Yeah,
a
yeah.
music
So
hero.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well
So
done your friend for going, you're coming
I
out.
know, I know, he's awesome. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah,
yeah,
love
exactly.
that. Well, we are coming to the end of our word, which is the letter D. And the word that I've chosen for D is dream. And I'd love to know what you dream of for kindness in the future.
So it was nice you didn't lead with the deepest question. That's good.
Just,
Uh,
off the top of your head. Yeah.
a dream for kindness. I would probably say that kindness is, we've talked about it a lot. Like, kindness is the place in which we're going to connect going forward. We're living in a super divided world right now. No matter where you are or what um, I don't know if I'm talking to you in Manchester or somebody in Manchester, or if I'm talking to somebody who's across the street here in Winnipeg.
Hmm.
Um, we're probably not going to see eye to eye on everything,
Hmm.
and kindness is the thing that will lead us to the place where we get that. CBC, we talked about CBC.
Hmm.
CBC is it's probably like any public broadcaster anywhere in the country, but there are supporters and there are people who don't like us whatsoever.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but there are times when you can still use that as a connection point. And I think back to we went to a small um, town, which was not very CBC friendly, to just help out with a community event. Um, and uh, I remember a guy coming up to me. Um, we just had some games, and we're talking about broadcasting. Had one of our local journalists there to answer questions, things like that. Nothing like earth shattering, but this guy came up to me as we were sort of starting to clean up and said, I hate you guys. Like, I hate you guys, but I
Wow.
do really love that you were here today and you did this. And that was the opening point
Whoa.
for us to have a conversation about what it is we do, what we could do better, what we're missing out in their community. Because, like we talked about, Canada's a vast place and we're never going to hit everything 100%.
Hmm.
It's that sort of kindness is human connection. Um, in the north, are CBC is a totally different beast, kind of, than it is
Hmm.
down. Most of Canada's population lives in the southern border,
Hmm.
right? and up north is it's remote. You can still get there. You can still fly there. There's still roads to those capital cities or territories up there and that sort of stuff, other than in Nunavut. But it's uh, the calling shows down in the south. You do current affairs and that sort of stuff for your
Hmm.
afternoon shows and your drive homes and that sort of stuff. Up north, there's lots of stories about how their call-in shows are like. My brother went. Somebody calls it and says my brother went hunting up near this bay. I haven't heard from him in a couple days. Is anybody out there seeing them and that sort of stuff? And somebody would call in, an hour or so later and say, "Oh, don't worry, I saw them yesterday. They're doing fine." That sort of
Wow.
stuff. So those sort of kindness moments are what connects us and that sort of stuff. And that's what I'm not, you know, I'm not a CBC spokesman, so I'm not allowed to talk about CBC's perspective on stuff. So I'm just talking about my own perspective on this sort of
Of
thing.
course.
But I that's what the goal for us is. Kindness is a way of understanding each other. It opens up
Yeah.
the door to connection, to allow us to just talk about different perspectives and allow us to understand each other. And that's my dream for it, is to use it more to understand each other.
Yeah, I love you said early on about kindness being a place. Like I love that almost geographic sense of it, that there is a place you can come to in a kind of shared understanding. And that might be in conversation over screens like we're doing, but it might actually be physically, like the community that you spoke about, where the guy
Sure.
spoke to you at the end
Yeah.
about hating CBC, but loving that you were there. I think what else is coming up for me as you say this is that I've talked in these podcast conversations about the misconception between kindness and niceness. What I'm getting from this as well is the idea that kindness, I think, is often misconstrued as being agreement or, uh,
Yeah.
you know, saying that you align yourself with someone else because you're being kind to them. And that isn't the case. You can disagree and be kind. We've mentioned that a few times. But that yeah, that it's a place for connection that doesn't mean necessarily unity or complete agreement or acquiescing to somebody. But it does mean respect and empathy and compassion, which are important things, strong things. And you can still disagree with that. There and we should, we don't all want to agree on everything. That's boring and robotic. But yeah, that really came up for me as you were saying that.
It might be even simpler than that. And I
Hmm.
think that in that, like, the through line, I talked about stories being, and you talked about stories being the through line of my sort of career and that sort of stuff, whether it's performing or or producing or broadcast, all that kind of stuff. The simple thing we can all do, that is the through line of all those stuff, is just to listen. We don't we don't listen to each other.
Yeah.
We hear the words and we immediately go to our own perspective or our own selfish. Um, when I say selfish, it's just our own inserting ourselves into that instead of just listening. Uh, um, when I bring kids and tourists through, and that I bring kids or students, media students, and that sort of stuff who are wanting to get into the business and that sort of stuff. And I'll bring them into the CBC and I'll have them sit down with the host and every radio host or a TV host or any of that kind of stuff. And that's the lesson they all say. I'm paid to talk. You think I'm paid to talk. I'm not. I'm paid to listen.
Mm.
It's what I'm hearing and what I'm getting from you that I can question on and have a conversation about. That's the key. And I think that's probably true. And that's probably at the heart of kindness.
Yeah. Thank you for boiling it down so simply like that. I think that's really key. As a poet, I often find look for the words, the distilling down language, but I
Yeah.
can also kind of talk through the houses, the long way
Yeah.
around to get to something. And it is always nice when you kind of just go, there is simplicity. So that sense of listening is just, yeah, beautiful. We are nearly at the end of our chat, and I feel like we have gone on this giant journey through a vast land of Canada or across the ocean or wherever. But yeah, really appreciate all of your insights and your experiences and stories. I guess as we come to a close, and this might link to what we've already talked about, but maybe not. I'll ask it anyway. Do you have a top tip for how to keep kind, creative, and connected?
I don't want it to sound uh, I don't want it to sound too I'm making it bigger than it is. I don't want this word to sound bigger than it is, but it's
Yeah,
courage, right? Courage is the other
courage.
one. And it's just the courage to take an idea and run with it, or listen to somebody and be courageous enough to be able to hold that perspective, to be courageous enough to be curious enough that you can ask the questions no one else is asking. Uh,
Yeah.
that courage allows you to do those things. It's not courage in a hero way, not courage in a
Yeah.
World War II movie way.
Yeah.
It's not Saving Private Ryan courage.
Yeah.
It's just about being able to stick with it and take an idea from the beginning to the end. And it might not always be right, but it's something, and that's important. So
That's such a valuable word. And I think you need courage to listen and you need courage to be
yes,
curious sometimes, where it isn't always easy. You need courage to be kind a lot of the time too. So what a fantastic word to end on. Thank you for that. As we wrap up, is there anything you want to share or plug or want listeners to pay attention to or check out?
check out the all of the podcasts that Rose does. Check out every episode. That's what I would say. No, I get audiences for the stuff I do, which is wonderful and nice. I would say to all folks who are maybe not in Canada, check out Canadian artists, check out Canadian art of any way, shape, or form. It's really, really important. It has an interesting perspective because of a lot of things we talked about today. I was chair of the board for theater projects here in Manitoba, so at one point as well for a couple of years, and was on the board for that for a while. So just the artists in Manitoba and Canada work extremely hard in a massive place. They're underfunded, and they usually need to be um, aware at least of working in so many multiple languages, right? And multiple cultures. So it's really it's important that they get their due. And so I would say check out Canadian art, check out of any sort of form, whether it's performance, uh, visual, any of that kind of stuff. But I am totally being selfish here and that sort of stuff, but the world needs more Canada right now because it's got a very distinct difference between a lot of other places. Like I said, I'm not going to put myself in any sort of political standing and that sort of stuff, but there's a very big difference between Canadian uh, multiculturalism and America's melting pot, right? And there's a massive difference in which one is multiculturalism is celebrated and the other one is come be one of us. That's not what Canada stands for, and I think Canada is needs to be a leader because of that, because of that perspective. And I think a lot of people can learn from it. They can learn a lot about kindness from Canada. Canada's not perfect. There's a lot of things that we fight about here. There's a lot of things that we there's no it's like any other spot. There's an anti-immigration sentiment and that sort of stuff in Canada and that sort of stuff right now. But on the whole, Canada is Canada's ideals are to be aspired to. So yeah, that would be my last final word.
Gosh, that was really inspiring and just so powerfully said. Thank you, Justin. It makes me want to fly across the pond and meet you for a Slurpee and some poutine. So hopefully I'll get to do that again before too long. But for now, just thank you so much for spending this time with us and really, really appreciate you and look forward to when we cross paths again in Winnipeg.
Sounds great. Thank you for this. That was fun.
Oh, in addition to having huge cravings for a big dish of mac and cheese, I'm feeling so energized by Justin's words, especially about kindness being the place where we connect. That space for listening, humility, honesty, and being challenged, but with care and patience. Oh, let's find more places for that to happen, like on a walk or over a coffee or even in a Zoom chat across time zones, like the one I've just had with Justin. And even though, like he said, it's not a perfect place, Canada has some brilliant examples of creativity and connection. The world needs more Canada right now. Those words will echo in me for a while. Thanks, Justin. For now, thank you so much for listening. You can find links to the things we spoke about in the show notes, and we'll have another episode coming your way soon. You can like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and YouTube, where captions are available. And please share comments. They don't have to be glowing, but even challenging words can be shared with kindness. If you want to find out more about me and my work, you can get in touch through my website, rosecondo.net, and there you can see beautiful illustrations by Neve Wood, also known as Little Badger. Our beautiful music has been composed and recorded by Eleonora Rosca. And finally, please share this. Help us to keep kind, creative, and connected.